Hi, it's the Chappiness guy. Welcome to today's episode of Vestibular Talks. Today's special guest is Vanessa, also known by her Instagram handle as the Grateful V. Vanessa is here to talk to us about neuroplasticity, healing chronic illness, and moving forward in our lives regarding all the difficulties that we might encounter. All right, I hope you like the episode. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Find your Chappiness, guys. Hi, Vanessa. We're live. How are you today?
Hi. All right, we're live. I'm excited to do this.
Welcome to this episode of Vestibular Talks. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and to teach all of us about your own journey and your own experience. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for even offering. I'm really, just honored to even be a part of this.
Thanks. That's great. All right, Vanessa, would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and how things began?
Sure. Sure. So I'm Vanessa. You may know me as the Grateful V on Instagram. I have about an 11-year, you could say, battle or history with chronic illness. It started for me in 2009 and 10 when I contracted a parasite. Prior to that, I was actually a federal officer.
Hmm.
Um, Part of my function was to deport criminals outside of the country.
Wow.
I was very strong, um, full of energy and life. I was living my dream job, just got a house, got engaged. It was like everything that I ever wanted was right in my
Well,
hands.
please.
And then within, just so quickly, it was all just snapped away. So I did travel to Vietnam and I contracted a deadly parasite.
Okay.
I didn't know I had it at the time. And for a good 9 months, I was just having these debilitating symptoms that no one could understand. So, there was hospital visit upon hospital visit, and no doctor could explain. And one of the first symptoms I had was vertigo.
Okay.
So I would not wish it on my worst enemy. I would
Mhm.
say it is probably one of the worst symptoms you can have.
Yes.
And for me, it started, and I didn't know what was happening. It's that feeling where you're basically being falling, into the ground. Like that's how I felt, and I didn't know where the ceiling was or where the floor was, and it was just how it is.
It's yeah.
Yeah, everybody all those vestibular warriors out there get it. And that's kind of what really started me to say, like, something's wrong with me. Like, there's something going on. I was normal and healthy. Along with those symptoms, I developed like tons of GI issues, fatigue, anemia, malnutrition, and doctor after doctor kept saying, you're fine, nothing's wrong with you, until I found one of my neurologists who was checking me for, other issues. He said, you know what, like, you came from Vietnam. Let's check this out. This could be something else that they're missing. And long story short, after 9 months, I ended up having all these tests done, and they were sent to the lab in Atlanta, Georgia, because at the time Canada didn't even have the technology to find these types of parasites. Lo and behold, I was diagnosed with something called strongyloides and another two parasites. So it was three at the same time.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I had to do chemotherapy to get rid of it. And it
Oh,
was like right before my wedding. I had to risk like losing my hair. It made me very unwell. And that was the beginning. I would say like that parasite was the gift that kept on giving, because
wow.
for like 10, for a lifetime after, things just got worse. So it started with that. Over the years, I did get treated and I got rid of it, but it left like chronic GI symptoms. I developed migraines, chronic fatigue, brain fog, all these crazy symptoms that I never had before. I was on and off of work. I was thankful enough and lucky enough to have two beautiful children during this time, but each pregnancy was just, it was very hard. It was a very difficult and like very high risk. But again, I'm thankful that I was able to have these children. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, where I thought things couldn't get worse, and they did.
Yeah.
And it was after a very stressful time of my life with, work, and had gone back to school and having, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, doing renovations. It was just, everything was compounded together. And that's when like the spinning started again. So I think it was in like May of that year, 2017, where I basically started crawling. I could not walk. It was months of just, I needed to just feel the floor. And that spiraled into other symptoms. So my heart rate increased exponentially. It would go up to 200 beats per minute. And then I would faint. So anytime I sat up, stood up, I would black out. I could not stand. I could not eat. I could not digest food. I was basically wasting away, and the doctors had no idea why. I was eventually admitted to the hospital for a month, and just by the grace of God, that same neurologist who discovered that I had the parasite 10 years before, or sorry, 7 years before, happened to be on the cardiology ward, and he saw me. And then he walked in and he's like, he'd never seen me so sick. And he asked me some questions and he's like, I think I know what you have. And he's like, have you heard of POTS syndrome? And I'm like, what's that? Right. And he basically diagnosed me that day with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And the name basically means like when you stand up, your heart goes up. But it is so much more than that. It is like a dysfunction of your entire autonomic nervous system. So things that you take for granted, like breathing, digesting, your heart rate, your blood pressure, just stops working. And you have no control over it. And it feels like you're constantly being chased by a bear because your heart is constantly just racing.
Yes.
And yeah, it was, he diagnosed me that day, and I was happy I had an answer. I was also diagnosed with vestibular migraine during that time. I was diagnosed with IBS, malabsorption, gastroparesis, hemiplegic migraines, glaucoma, anemia, hormonal imbalances, polycystic ovarian syndrome, chronic fatigue, small fiber neuropathy, chronic urticaria, agoraphobia, panic disorder, depression. The list goes on. There's tons that I've missed. So these are all of the labels I was given over the past 10 years.
Okay.
I was a very sick girl. So, when I went to a doctor's appointment and they're like a new specialist, and it's like, oh, fill out what's wrong with you. And I'm like, it's easier to fill out what isn't wrong. Right? Like, so it was, I was finally back, to the hospital when I was diagnosed with POTS. I was given about like 12 different medications to take at that time. I was sent home because I was stable enough not to die. Like I was, if you saw pictures of me, I didn't have long to go. And I had to move in with my parents because I couldn't care for my kids, and my husband had to pay the bills, so he was working. And I lived there for months. I could not get out of bed. I could not bathe myself. I could barely eat. I couldn't, feed myself. I was in a deep, deep depression. I did not want to wake up, in the morning. Like it was enough. It was absolute hell on earth. And at that point, I mean, I had no faith. It was just like, God, how could a good God let this happen to me? I was just angry and bitter and just very, very, very dark and down. And thankfully, my parents were, very faithful, and they begged me, let us take you to church and have the priest pray over you, like, have some hope, let's do this. So on one occasion, they carried me physically to the church and laid me on the altar. And the priest of our local parish, he did a special prayer over me. And I just remember that moment. I'm laying down because I can't stand up, and my parents are crying, and I'm crying, and the priest is just full with emotion, and he's reading this beautiful prayer. And it was like in that instance, there was just like almost like just a hint of light that opened up, right,
Mhm.
in my darkness. And I was like, okay, I can hold on a little longer. And just after that, I ended up discovering neuroplasticity. And then my journey to healing began. So that's kind of in a nutshell my story.
Uh,
Um,
Vanessa, a lot of the things you said, I relate so much to them because many of us, when we had these symptoms, they showed up right at the point in our lives where we were on top of the world, like you described. You had everything you
yes,
wanted. You had the job you wanted, the life you wanted. You achieved the dreams and goals you set out for. And same thing for me and for many others. At the point before this hit me, a successful career, very very high paced life, but I felt like I was accomplishing everything. I just bought a house. I was about to get married as well, and then this hit me. So
wow,
it's something that kind of like grounds us back to level
yes,
zero, because everything that you think you've been achieving and building suddenly crumbles down, and this tests you, like this brings out the darkest emotions in us, and it's like, okay, are you gonna survive this, or what's gonna happen with you, type of thing. And it literally, like you said, that you were crawling, this condition literally brings you to your knees, like you legit have zero balance, don't have the strength. Every time that you stand up or sit up, you get really dizzy. You like in your case, you were fainting. So this brings you to such a low point in our lives that I'm glad you were able to find that little ray of hope to hang on and to be like, you know what, I'm gonna continue fighting. I'm gonna get better, not only for you but for your family, because you have young
yes,
children, you have a husband, your parents also looking out for you. I'm sure they were extremely worried and concerned, like what are we gonna do with it? What's gonna happen? So yes, like this is so, your story in your journey is so relatable that it almost makes my heart start beating faster too, because I'm like I know what you went through, because I lived it too. And you feel so weak and so vulnerable in those times,
yes,
because you
powerless. Yeah, right.
powerless, exactly, because at
Yeah,
some point you were in the top of the world, you felt like the world and the universe was yours, and then
yours.
out of
Yes,
the blue something took you down to your knees, like and the worst part is that the doctors don't even have an explanation. They're like, well, it could be this, it could be that. Let's throw this medication at you, let's see how
yeah,
you react to it. So you're hoping for an answer, you're hoping for that little ray of light that shows you that things will and can get better, right? And
yeah,
obviously
exactly.
it seems like it got better for you. And before we get there, please let us know first, when this started happening to you, your fiance, what was his reaction? Because after seeing
Wow.
you healthy and happy and strong, and then all of a sudden you become basically a shell of who you used to be, then what was his reaction? What was going through his mind?
It was, I can't even tell you how hard it's been. Um, I got sick 9 months before our wedding, so it's like we had just started this life. We had been together 7 years before. And in my case, my husband had cancer while we were together. So I had been through something with him that, that tested us already. And so I saw him suffer and go through what he did, and I knew that feeling of almost losing someone. And now to do that to him was like, just, it was heartbreaking.
Yes.
And the worst part of it, I think, was that we didn't have answers. We didn't have an action plan to treat me. We didn't have, like, like my husband himself would say to me, he goes, I would rather have cancer multiple times than go through what you're going through. And that was just like his perspective, because he's like, with what he had, he had a diagnosis and he had a treatment plan. It was chemo, it was radiation, it was surgery. He knew what to do. But when you're in this, invisible illness world, in this chronic illness world where you don't have any answers and you are desperate, specialists after specialists, thousands of dollars trying every single therapy, you
Yes.
start to get, right, like, hopeless, because you're desperate to try anything. And I'm telling you, I tried everything that I could find.
Yeah, I believe.
And my husband, was like is the most supportive person, where he's like, you want to try that? Okay, you know what? I'm going to work some extra hours. Let's try this. Let's see if we can afford this. Like, he's been the most supportive person, but I can tell you that it terrifies him, because he's had to, like, plan my funeral in his mind when I was my sickest. And he had to think, how am I going to raise these kids without her?
Yeah.
What am I going to tell the kids? How can I go on? But at the same time, it's tiring for them, because, your spouse comes home every day and sees you in pain, or, in suffering, and they can't help. So it's just it's probably the biggest test you go through with your partner. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I'm so lucky that it didn't tear us apart, and that he's stuck with me,
Yeah.
through all these years, right? Because we've been together now like 18, 19 years together, and married, going on 11 years.
Well,
So, I mean, everyone's experience is different, but I'm sure you can relate. Like, it puts that
oh
strain
yeah.
on the marriage.
And you're right, Vanessa. You at that point of desperation, we try anything and everything, even things that make zero sense. We're willing to give it
Yes.
a go just to see if we get a little bit better. And the burden of thousands and thousands of dollars that often these treatments cost, and we don't care how much money it costs, even if we have
No.
to sell our belongings, because we just want to
Yes.
get better. So I know what you mean about that. And it's a very difficult experience. Now, Vanessa, when you were experiencing this, I know part of the guilt that I had when I was at my sickest point was the fact that I didn't want to become a burden to anyone. I didn't want to become a
Yes.
burden to my wife, to my parents, to my family. I told them, I said, I'd rather, and God forgive me for this, but I said, I'd rather die and be gone, so that I know that I don't become a burden to you. And they all rally around me, and they all said, you will never be a burden, because we love you. Like,
Love you.
regardless of what we have to do, what we have to go through, how much money it takes, we will all be here for you, because that's what family does, and that's what love does. So it broke me. It broke me, because part of me felt so blessed to have them, but part of me felt so like I don't want to put them through this. I'm living through
Yes.
this hell on my own. I don't want to put anybody else through this. And even hardest for me was I couldn't be a dad to my son. My son will come home, and I will be on the ground crying and crying, and he will come and hug me, and he's like, Daddy, he's gonna be okay. And sorry, I'm tearing up.
No, I relate to that
and
so much. Yeah.
and he will hug me, and he will say, we will pray together so you can be okay. And the fact that my own son was providing me with that strength to keep me going. Sorry, Vanessa.
No, it's okay. I can relate so much to this. Like, the ache runs deep with me, because the guilt, like you said, and the shame, I used to say, you guys are better off without me. And I
Yeah.
believed it. I believed it at that point. And they, thankfully, like you, I was surrounded by this incredible family who says, you would do the same for us, right? If the tables were turned, I would be doing the same for them. right? I wouldn't complain and say, I don't want, oh, you're a burden, or, if you're sick and I love you, I'm going to do anything I can to help you.
True.
And it was, like you said, the fall was very humbling, but seeing the love around you, it was so, I was so grateful for it, but there was like a bittersweetness to it, right? Because you do have that guilt. And seeing all the other moms out there running with their kids, taking them to the park, and then my kids are watching me collapse. I remember waking up one time with the ambulance wheeling me out of the house, and my daughter saying, "Is she dead? Is she dead?" and screaming. So it's I think, like, I would never wish this on anyone. So I relate 100% with you. Having your child take care of you and pray for you is heartbreaking, but it also gave us strength, I think, right? Like, I feel
Yes.
like they were my reason for getting up and continuing in this fight. If I didn't have to push myself to get to, take care or help them get to school or whatever it might be, I would have never have gotten out of bed. There's no way.
You're right.
So I think we are beyond blessed to have families like this, but do not underestimate the grief and the pain and that feeling of guilt
You're
that
right.
comes in this process.
And the depression that this brings, I never in my life experienced depression ever until this happened to me. i
Same.
was i was the most outgoing, happy guy that found positive outcomes on everything. And when this happened to me, i I understood what people that live with depression go through. And I'm like, you know what, like, it's it's so hard for them and for us that many people or many doctors tell you, oh, it's anxiety, oh, you're a hypochondriac, oh, it's all
Yeah.
in your mind. And in reality, you're living something that is so real, and more real to the person that is living it. And the fact that you don't feel acknowledged, it's also very
Oh,
heartbreaking, because
yeah.
you feel like you're going crazy. People are like,
Yeah.
oh, stop it, it's your anxiety. Well, obviously, yes, we're anxious because we're dealing with some symptoms that make zero sense, like the symptoms that you described earlier. It's almost like you're reading this out of a novel, or a book, or a
A
movie.
horror story, right?
The symptoms are
Yeah.
so, like, out there, but they are so real to us. And what you described, Vanessa, it seems like when something goes wrong, it creates a chain reaction or a domino effect, that, like you said, you were diagnosed with POTS, vestibular migraines, and all these other conditions, right after the other, the viruses that
Yeah.
attack. So it seems like our bodies are in such state of fight and flight, that one thing
Yes.
triggers all these other crazy conditions that have almost no real treatment or no real explanation. So, Vanessa, you take us back. Well, let's start with the viruses first. Those parasites that
Okay.
attack you. How do you get them, and why do you think they attacked you?
So that's a question I've asked myself a lot, because I went on this trip with my partner. So it was a work trip, and he didn't get anything. So it's like we ate the same thing, we went to the same places. Why me? From what I understand, like the deadly parasite that I got, it's as simple as me walking with sandals like in the city, and there being like a puddle of infected water, and it splashed on my leg, and I may have had an open cut, like something so simple like that. So it wasn't in the food that I ate or the water that I drank. Um, that's kind of what the specialist explained to me. And hearing that was like just devastating, because I'm like, why me? Right? Like, why?
Yeah.
How come he didn't get it? And I start to think, and I'm like, and it could have been just chance, but it could have also been the fact that, like, prior to that, I was, traveling like crazy. My immune system was down, because I was working like weekends, working late shift work, traveling to Vietnam, Philippines, and BC within a month. So it was a lot. And I wonder if maybe that contributed to my body's ability to fight something off like this, right? I don't know. And the fact that it took so long to figure it out too, because of just the random symptoms it created, that was the hardest part. And maybe if I got diagnosed sooner, it wouldn't have caused all the damage that it did, right? So there's all these questions, but in the end, we don't know. And I think that it happened for a reason, because I think at the same point, I was kind of headed down maybe a more disastrous path,
Yeah,
right? Like, yeah. So, and I don't know if it, I wonder what my life would have been if that didn't happen. But then I think I'm actually content with my life now, because I have learned so much and grown through this experience that I would not be who I am today. In fact, I don't even think who I was back then was authentically me. I think the person who's come out of this challenge is more my true self, what God wanted me to be, than I would have ever been had I not experienced this.
Yeah, yeah. And Vanessa, so when experiencing POTS, experiencing the gastric disturbances that you had that give you nausea, wouldn't allow you to eat, did they prescribe any specific diet of foods that will maybe help you heal your system, or they just told you, well, whatever you eat is anything is good?
So I tried a lot of different medications, PPIs, medication that would help me digest enzymes, pain medication. I did try keto diet, gluten-free, vegan. I tried many elimination diets. And I think with every diet that I did, I got worse. Like, I really didn't. I think because I was restricting myself, it would turn on that fight or flight mechanism in my body. And it would remind me that something's wrong with me. And it would, make me feel worse. So with POTS in particular, the theory behind it is that you are stuck in fight or flight.
Yes.
Right. So that switch that's turned on, it is stuck on. So you can't even calm down. So everything is perceived as a threat, really. Like, if you think about it, something so simple as, like a honking of a horn of a car would get me like in a state of like panic, right? Yeah. And watching a movie, I can't even tell you, like just watching the news or something like that would trigger that stress response to the point where I actually felt like I was in danger. It's illogical. It makes no sense. But when you are operating from that fear response, logic is out the window. You can't think straight. Like, it just, you literally can't. And I know that with each diet I tried, my body felt more stressed. And so for me, it was counterproductive. Right. And then, I mean, even with a keto diet that I did, that was prescribed to me for the migraines, I ended up developing pancreatitis. So it was just like, everybody's body is so different, and might work for some people, it might not work for others. But I find that, yeah, right. Like, so, I mean, for me, I didn't have much luck with diets, but obviously eating a healthy, like I'm Greek, so we eat like a pretty Mediterranean diet, and it does, my body wonders. I feel best on like olive oil and vegetables and fish and chicken and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I didn't have luck with diets, to be honest, but it was something I had to try, right?
Yeah, and the Mediterranean diet that you just mentioned is often regarded as one of the healthiest and safest diets that people can do. And it includes a lot of good foods, and it's basically, it limits a lot of heavy grease and other things like that.
Yeah.
But it provides you with the nutrients, the essential nutrients that your body needs to kind of like perform at its maximum capacity. Yeah. Vanessa, what about for the POTS? Because POTS in migraines or vestibular migraines seem to be very linked.
Yes.
They seem to be quite connected. And the fact that when you get up, you get really dizzy. When you sit, you get really dizzy. Any function like digesting food, chewing food can make you really dizzy. Uh, so, what kind of treatment do you use for both of those conditions, POTS and migraines as well?
Sure. So I'm actually not on any treatment for migraines right now anymore. I was at the point where I was getting at least 26 full-blown migraines a month. I was seen by the top doctor in Toronto at Women's College, who was amazing, and I had like one of the most severe cases. With every episode, I would get the vestibular issues. I would have severe pain where I would be, throwing up. It was just terrible, blinding pain. I was on every triptan you can think of. I was on anti-seizure medication. I tried anti-inflammatories, diets, as I mentioned, and I was also prescribed Aimovig, which is a monthly injection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was rather new when it came out, but I ended up through this neuroplasticity process. So, like I said, I discovered the first program was DNRS, so the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. That helped me the most for POTS, but it didn't help as much with migraines. But what did, and it was actually recommended to me by the physician at Toronto General, was something called Curable. So it's an app called Curable, and it's based on the work of Dr. John Sarno, who's a very well-known, like he's passed now, but he's a very well-known doctor on who helped people like celebrities, all sorts of people heal from chronic pain. So his premise is that all pain comes from the brain, and oftentimes the pain in your body that you're experiencing is not as a result of anything wrong, but as a result of a like a protection mechanism. So for instance, if you are experiencing something emotional and you're repressing those feelings and you're under a lot of stress, or you have a lot of anger towards something, when you repress those emotions, they'll come up in another way. So be pain or other symptoms. And the funny thing was that as I started to learn this, I just literally listened to a book of his online on YouTube for free. And just by listening to it, and I had a migraine at the point, the migraine started to dissipate a little. And then I bought his book and I read it, his second book, The Mind Body Prescription, and it blew my mind. And I was like, this is me. This is what's going on with me. My brain thinks it's safer to experience pain than it is for me to face my own trauma, my emotions, my situation. And so once that kind of clicked into my mind, I was able to rewire my brain to look at pain differently, to look at pain as a message from my body, not as a threat, not that something's wrong, but that I have to listen. What is it telling me? So the Curable app helped with, it taught journaling exercises, visualizations, meditations, and the big component was the education component. So it tells you how the brain works the way it does. They have some of the top experts in North America, actually around the world, that speak about this. And that helped me manage the pain, and I rewired that loop, that pain cycle in my brain. So I wired it out, and I've gotten down to maybe a couple migraines a month around like my hormonal cycle, and I'll take Advil or Tylenol for it. So there is no migraine medication anymore. It doesn't rule my life. And it's just amazing how the brain can work. And with regards to POTS, I did do a program called the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, and this was excellent for anyone going through dysautonomia or multiple chemical sensitivity, chronic fatigue syndrome. All these chronic illnesses, the idea behind them is that you're stuck in that fight or flight response, right? So you're operating from that. So this program helps you to turn it off. And through a series of exercises, visualizations, proclamations, it helps you to turn off that stress response and to go into a state of rest and digest instead of fight or flight. And by doing so, you are able to heal naturally. So
it's very interesting because all of these treatments that you're mentioning are number one natural, like they are very natural, and
Yep.
it's basically like you have the mechanism in your head, your brain, to
Yes.
get better. You just need to provide it with the essential tools that it needs in order
Exactly.
to produce that healing or to manifest the healing. So it's very interesting what you're saying because often you're right. We're often stuck in that sympathetic system of like fear, anxiety, panic, depression, but and we don't even realize it because our
Yes.
lives are so high paced that often you just go, and that keeps you on that emotional state of sympathetic response.
Yeah.
But when we learn to meditate, to pray, prayer is also a really good form of
Yes.
meditation. To relax, to do exercises, to be in a more calm environment, then we trigger our parasympathetic system, which then allows our brain to kind of like reevaluate, like, okay, let's evaluate
Yes.
what's going on with us, how we can heal it, and what things that are happening are a priority that we can just go in and attack those ones first and then move on to the next one. So everything that you're saying is extremely valuable and interesting. Did those approaches like the neuroplasticity and these other treatments that you experience help the vertigo as well, like the sensation of dizziness, being
Yes.
yes?
So
Okay.
that was the first symptom to subside when I started the neuroplasticity was vertigo. So it was the first symptom I noticed to subside, and I was like almost as if I didn't even notice that it left. I was like, wait, I was dizzy, like it just went away. And I'm not going to say that it never like, I never ever experienced any of it again. I have had like tiny episodes, but I'm able to snap myself out of them by doing the talk down and by doing the exercises that I've learned. So I have all these tools, to basically deal with whatever comes up, and
Wow.
it's pretty empowering, yeah. And I was also just through learning myself and doing the work, I was able to discover, why was I having these episodes? I had to do the deeper work of my beliefs and figure out what was the payoff for this. Like, was there an emotional component to having this symptom, whatever it might be? Like, did this migraine now give me the chance to rest? Right? Like, did it give me a break from the kids? Did it get me a day off work? So there was another hidden component behind that. And I mean, that's like a deeper issue, but I had to do that work as well because I noticed that I had an attachment to a lot of these symptoms because they were giving me something that I wasn't giving myself,
Yes.
right? I wasn't, it's profound when you come to that realization. And it's not that I did it to myself because you're not consciously, it's not my fault. It's not that we choose these things, but it's on an unconscious, subconscious
It
level
manifests.
where
Yeah.
these things are happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's,
Vanessa, I know you're strong with your faith, and I often get criticized because a lot of people are like, well, if God exists, why is God giving us this? Or how come that God doesn't heal
yes.
you? Or,
yeah.
I don't believe in God, I believe in science. So my response is number one, we cannot blame God for every bad thing that happens to us. And
Yep.
we don't thank him for the great things that happen to us, but we seem to blame him for everything
For
bad
the
that
bad.
happens to us.
Yes.
So I tell them that. I also tell them, you know what, like you can still believe in science and still believe in God. There doesn't have to be a division. God and science can be together because they are both
Yes.
providing you with the resources that you need to get better. So you don't need to say, well, if I'm gonna believe in medication, then I won't believe in God. But if I'm gonna believe in God, I won't need to believe in medication. They can be a unison. They can be a way to mix this together and make sure that they are working for you, like they are working for your own well-being. But a lot of
Exactly.
people often say, no, like if God loved me, he wouldn't have given me this. So in your perspective, because you have faith, how has your faith helped you go through this?
I will tell you honestly, if I didn't have faith, I would not have gotten through this. And I discovered my faith through this process. So I mean, I was baptized Greek Orthodox, so I'm Christian based, but I never really went to church. I never ever read the Bible. I never connected with anything more than myself. Um, but going through this and being put in this dark, dark, dark place, it forced me to turn to him because I had nothing left. There was nothing left inside of me, and there was nothing else I could do. And so I, had that honest conversation with God, and I did. I yelled at him, I screamed, I let it all out because I had to.
Mm-hmm.
And through this process, I started to feel a connection and this hope and this belief. I connected with who's now my spiritual father, so our local priest, and he ended up teaching me a lot. We read the Bible. I started studying it, and no matter how sick I was, it felt like I was still, would say, like enclosed in a big hug, as if I had someone around me always. And I would say that I don't think I would be able to go through this journey without that faith. I can't believe people who do. And I don't think there's a harm. I feel like believing in something more than yourself is like one of the best things you can do while you're on this journey. But I have also had that question, why does God allow these things to happen? Right? Like I hear it all the time. I don't believe in God. How can you still believe in God when he put you through all that stuff? And I'm like, but don't you see what he did along the way? Like his hands were in everything. He brought people into my life that brought me joy. He had family members and friends that I wasn't even close with cook meals and bring them to my house. He had people come together to help me. I had support from people I would have never expected. I was able to, get closer with those people. And when it became to financially, because it's a very stressful situation to be in, he provided. Somehow he provided. And I can tell you that I think that I had to go through this to come to him and to realize my faith. And that if I hadn't gone through this, I don't think I would have this connection with God. And I think that it doesn't hurt to believe. Like, what have you got to lose? And with regards to science and healing and having faith, they do work together. It's not an either or, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yes.
And I know God gave us this body. God gave us these brains of ours and the power, to renew our minds. So
Yes.
he's given us these tools, and it's up to us to use them.
Yes, very, very well said. Vanessa, and now that you're talking about these tools and how we use them, I know you're very active on Instagram with your posts to kind of like inspire and encourage others, motivate them to see the light in the dark moments. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Sure. I'm right now working on a website. I haven't gotten there yet, but right now I'm mainly on Instagram. And you can DM me or comment on a post. I am hoping to get some sort of coaching started. I'm like in the beginning process of it because I do have a passion for this, and just to help people and to kind of be your guide to help you, give you hope and help you see there is a way out of this. Things can get better, and to always hold on to that hope, right? Because there's no other choice, right? We must keep going. We have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does the future hold for Vanessa?
Ha, good question. Um, I'm doing a lot better. I mean, I'm miles away from where I was. I'm not 100% yet, but I'm still training and working on it. And I mean, I'm finally happy. I would say I have like a genuine joy in my life. So I think that's what I appreciate the most. And I'm hoping to branch out and maybe do some more coaching or speaking, maybe write a book. Uh, and just be happy and enjoy the moment, right? Raise my kids and enjoy these moments where I feel really good.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Vanessa, and my last question to you is, as you know, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness. So it means find your happiness. So how does Vanessa find her chappiness?
Oh. Ah, I love music. So I have it on all the time listening, and just playing, like playing with my kids, doing silly things, connecting with others. I just love to connect with others. And I think that's how right now you brought me chappiness today, because I was able to connect with you on a very, beautiful level. And that brings me joy. It really fills my heart. Hearing your story and what you're seeing, what you're doing makes me happy. So I hope I brought you some happiness today as
You did,
well.
you did, and I appreciate it's good when you connect with someone that is so real and so kind-hearted, because not many people can get me to be at that vulnerable point where I was with you today, and I got to that point because I felt at peace with you. I felt at ease. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel that you will criticize me or you will say, "Oh well, you were weak for being like that." I felt that I could honestly be who I am with you, and that you will understand what my heart was feeling. So thank you, because it's
Oh,
not.
that's the best compliment you could have ever given me. I honestly,
No,
that is such a huge compliment to me, and I thank you so much for that.
thank you, no, thank you. And I believe that you having gone through all of this provides you with the strength and the tools to help others. And that's why I think that if you're taking the path of being a life coach, or just uh, talk to others that are going through dark moments, I think they are going to find such a resource in you, because you can relate to what they are feeling, and you can walk them and guide them through that process to help them see the light at the end of that dark tunnel. So I think many of us are going to be blessed to have us, like to have you in our lives, teaching us and guiding us,
Thank
and,
you.
and like moving us through this process, through this journey, because that's what it is, a journey. So
It
no,
is.
thank you for that, and I'm very excited to see what the future brings for Vanessa, and
Thank
I
you.
hope that we can keep in touch, and I'm always more
Yes, I
happy,
would love to.
I'm always more happy to find another Canadian. So it's great. It's great.
Yes.
Go
Woohoo.
Canada. So
Yes, finally.
that's awesome. And yeah, I hope we can keep in touch. And I'm very happy that we did this together. And thank you for being so brave and so strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate you so much, and I'm excited for what you're going to do in the future, because already it's just like you're blowing up. I love it, and I love the energy and positivity you put out into the world, and I thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Vanessa. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.